I mean, if you don't love true crime,
Are you even a millennial?
welcome back to Millennial Murders. I'm Natalia,
Hello. I'm Stephanie.
and I've got a great episode today. But first, do we have any housekeeping?
Not necessarily, other than you've been teasing with this story for like a month. Because even when I saw you, you're like, I've got this story. And I'm like, okay, can't wait. And then here we are like a year later.
Yes, it's been a whole year. No, this has been a real whopper, and it took so much to unravel this, and I've been so excited. So I've had this one in my back pocket since we went to Mexico.
Oh my God.
So I'm so excited. I'm going to jump right in.
Okay, cool.
And here we go. We're taking our passports back to Mexico.
Yay.
So Stephanie and I were recently in Cozumel, Mexico, and I'm in love with it. The food, the culture, everything about the island just calls to me. However, I am so glad I didn't find this story before our vacation because it is horrifying. I don't know why I feel like doing this a lot lately, but I'm going to go ahead and warn people.
Oh,
This
wow.
this episode is going to be super gory. And
Good.
while our podcast in general is a no holds barred when it comes to choosing cases, this is one I'm going to give a heavy trigger warning to. We're going to describe in detail horrible things that monsters enacted on other people. I will tell you, my listeners, when I'm about to go into it in case you want to stick around until then. But otherwise, go on and have a nice day. If you are the parent of a teen or a college-aged kid, I'm looking at you because this story will give you nightmares. Or you can stay because, like me, you will always wonder what we said behind your back.
Right?
It's your choice. So let's jump in.
All right.
On the night of March 14th, 1989, during college spring break, when more than 5,000 students were out partying, a university student disappeared off the streets of a Mexican town called Matamoros. The disappearance of 21-year-old Mark Kilroy was every parent's worst nightmare come true. What no one realized yet was that the search for Mark Kilroy would lead to the discovery of the most violent Mexican cult ever known, a cult responsible for brutal sacrificial deaths. The town of...
I've never heard of this. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. No, I didn't either. So, first about the town. Matamoros, Mexico is on the southern bank of the Rio Grande River, directly across the border from Brownsville, Texas. The Matamoros-Brownsville metropolitan area blends together, with people constantly crossing back and forth, and the combined cities house more than 1.3 million people. The town is a major historical site for Mexico, as it was the stage for battles in the American Civil War, the Texas Revolution, and the Mexican Independence War, among others. It was in the Matamoros Opera House that the Mexican national anthem was played in public for the first time. Despite its distinguished history, Matamoros is a dangerous place to visit. For perspective, on a safety scale, where 0 is the most dangerous and 100 is considered generally very safe, Cancun is rated as a 71, and Matamoros is rated as a 40.
Oh, okay.
Muggings and kidnappings for ransom are not uncommon, and traveling alone is discouraged. The U.S. State Department has issued a do not travel advisory to the area, and if people choose to visit, they warn tourists not to wear jewelry in public, to avoid being out at night. Even with this reputation, The city has been a popular destination for college students on spring break for decades due to its lax drinking laws. Every year in the spring, the Texas Department of Safety issues warnings, which seem blatantly ignored if the line of cars waiting to cross the bridge into Mexico is any indication. So now we'll go into our story and cross the border together. I know this is going to sound like the start of a Sweet Valley High novel, but three best friends named Bill, Bradley, and Brent were on a road trip to South Texas for spring break. On the way, they stopped at Texas A&M University near Austin to pick up their friend and pre-med student, Mark Kilroy. I'm not saying this because it should have any bearing on the story, but holy cow, this kid looks like a spitting image of Matt Damon.
No, really?
Yeah, I'm going to text you a photo, and obviously we will put this up on Insta. When I looked it up, I was shocked. I was like, did
That's
Matt
crazy.
Damon have a secret love child? He did not,
Right?
but it's nuts. So I'm sending those to you now.
I will. Okay, so I've always heard of Cancun as being the place to go for spring break. The other place, I mean, I understand the easiness of getting to it, but is there anything even there other than just going to drink?
I mean, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I think the ease of getting to it is the biggest draw. I mean, you can literally just walk over this bridge. Oh, yeah, you're looking at the
Oh
picture.
my God, that looks exactly like him.
I know. It's really, it was a little spooky. Like a
It
doppelganger.
is. It really is. Oh my God. It's
Yes.
this whole smile.
Yeah, that whole phase.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So I
Okay.
think a lot of it is just the ease of getting to it. It's a big draw. The kids can just drive there. They don't have to get plane tickets. So large groups can just pile up into a car. You know, you don't have
Mm-hmm.
to worry about who has the money to get there, saving your money for a plane ticket, booking hotels. I think also, I mean, we're talking about like the late 70s, early 80s into the 90s. I don't know that Cancun was as popular as we're thinking of as we were growing up
I
into
guess.
like
Yeah.
the late 90s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we're thinking spring break TRL, like
Yeah, we are.
into the early 90s and late 90s. So I think it was a little different. But I also think, these kids were coming out of colleges in Texas. They met a lot of other kids from Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas, like all of those southern states. So I think a lot of the kids in that area just drove in. So I think that's what that deal was. So the group met up with a lot of other students on spring break at a popular destination, South Padre Island. After checking into the Sheraton Hotel, they hit it off with a group of girls from the University of Kansas. And since they all planned to head into Mexico for the next part of spring break, they decided to all head in together. They parked their cars as close as possible to the Gateway International Bridge. Then they crossed the border on foot. The group headed into the city of Matamoros. During spring break, on any given night, the main street in Matamoros is flooded with more than 15,000 tourists,
Wow.
many of them staying until the bars and clubs kick them out at 2 a.m. On the first night in Matamoros, the guys hung out with the Kansas University ladies in a bar called Sergeant Pepper's. And at the end of the night, they all safely crossed the border back to the US and slept in their rooms at the Sheraton. During
Okay.
the day, the boys did what you'd expect on a college spring break: hang out at the beach, check out the Miss Tan Line competition, which was sponsored by all the beer companies.
Yeah.
Just typical college kid stuff. After 10 p.m. on the second night, Mark Kilroy and his friends went back into the Mexican town, and they bounced from one bar to another. There were crowds everywhere, and they were all trying to talk to women and all a little drunk, so Mark was separated from his friends towards the end of the night. Once the bar started to close, Bill Huddleston went to find him so they could cross back over the border to their hotel. He managed to find Mark outside, speaking with a woman. So he took a minute to duck into an alley and take a peek. He was only gone for a minute, but we all know a minute's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
When Bill came out of the alley, Mark was nowhere to be found. Believing that Mark must have walked back to the restaurant, Bill met up with the other two guys, Bradley and Brent, in front of a popular joint, Garcia's, which was sort of their meeting spot for the end of the night where they'd go if they couldn't find each other. And when the guys realized that Mark wasn't around, they started to search for him. They searched for hours, way after everything had closed for the night. And they finally decided that maybe Mark had crossed the border and was waiting for them back at the car. Mark was not at the car when they went back.
Oh.
The group reasoned that Mark had gotten a ride back to the hotel from someone else, maybe one of the girls, and would come back to their room later that day. When Mark failed to appear, they didn't hesitate any longer. They contacted the police.
That's good though, but I can totally see why they waited, because they're probably like, oh, he hooked up with a girl or something, or he's at the girl's room. And there's no cell phones because
No, 1989.
And they're going back and forth to Mexico.
They're not Mark's 21. So legal drinking age. They're not like fresh out of high school. Mm-hmm. Completely reasonable to think, you know what? Maybe he went back to some girl's room. We'll just wait till morning.
I totally get that. And it's like, oh no, you can see the train coming and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
It's only now in hindsight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hindsight? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So at first, unfortunately, missing tourists during spring break in Matamoros isn't an uncommon occurrence. 60 people were reported missing during the spring break of 1989. Wow. So his case wasn't given much attention at the start. But it turned out that Mark's uncle worked for U.S. Customs in LA. Once his uncle heard the news, phone calls were made, and suddenly a task force was created in Brownsville to search for Mark Kilroy.
Crazy.
If you're lucky enough to have these resources, that is amazing. I just find it sad that until wheels are greased, justice grinds too slowly for everyone else.
Yeah, not everyone has an uncle in U.S. Customs or Homeland Security or anything like that. Jeez. Not everyone's a handsome Matt Damon lookalike.
Yeah, I mean, I really think about it's who you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad.
For sure.
At first, Mexican police suggested that Mark had disappeared back in Brownsville, Texas. But his friends were having none of that. They knew Mark had gone missing while they were still in Matamoros. Facing the negative impact of this disappearance on their tourism, the Mexican federal police agreed to assist in the case and assigned agents to assist the U.S. officers with questioning witnesses and informants. From the beginning, the police believed it was foul play and not simply another case of a student who was on a binge or sleeping away in some girl's apartment. They searched hospitals and jails, but could not find any leads to the whereabouts of Mark Kilroy. They actually brought in a hypnotist for Bill Huddleston, the guy who took the pee, to see if he could remember any further details surrounding Mark prior to the disappearance. And under hypnosis, Bill said he saw a Hispanic man with a scar on his face and a blue plaid shirt approaching Mark before he walked into the alley to urinate. This information was important, but not very helpful in locating Mark immediately. Since no ransom had been demanded, the police believed Mark was dead, and they began to look for a body rather than a missing person. Helicopters and terrain vehicles searched along the Rio Grande River, but no body was found. Mark's parents, James and Helen Kilroy, flew into Santa Fe and began to distribute more than 20,000 flyers, offering $15,000 reward to anyone who could help locate their son. In today's money, that's almost $40,000.
That's a good chunk of change.
On March 26th, the case was featured on America's Most Wanted with our friend, John Walsh, who we met in Nashville at CrimeCon. Yay. We love him. At this point, the case gained American attention. Parents everywhere lectured their kids on how to stay safe, and every college kid kissed their upcoming travel plans goodbye. Okay, so things are about to go to level 1000. You can go now, or don't say I didn't warn you. The break in the case came on April Fool's Day, and the fool was Serafin Hernandez Garcia, the nephew of a regional drug lord. A vehicle ran through a drug checkpoint without stopping, and instead of turning on the sirens and pulling him over, the Mexican police decided to follow the truck in an unmarked car to see where it was going. This led them outside the city limits to a ranch named Santa Elena, and it belonged to the Hernandez family, a large and powerful drug-dealing family. And that family was headed by Elio Hernandez. The family kept relatives and property on both sides of the border in order to facilitate smuggling marijuana. At their most profitable time, the Hernandez family was said to be smuggling a ton of weed per week. From the border, yes, yes, from the border all the way to Michigan.
That's insane. Do any of these people in the Hernandez family have a scar? I'm dying to know if that
so that detail doesn't really fit in precisely like to one of the big characters.
Yeah.
It was something that plugged in and to like one of their lower level members. But it was fascinating to me that Bill under hypnosis was able, like in a trance, to recall like every detail of what happened between his walk from the bar to the alley. Wow. Like he was able to recall everything under hypnosis, like in perfect, clear detail.
That's impressive.
It was so fascinating to me. Well, like what people will remember under hypnosis, which I know there's a lot of people will get up in arms about hypnosis. I know, don't come at me. However, I just found it very interesting. Anyway.
It is, yeah.
This establishment, the ranch belonging to the Hernandez family, and the nephew, Serafin, the uncle, Elio, we're going to put a pin in that. This is very important for later. So we're going to leave that for now. But back to the investigation. Instead of rushing onto the Hernandez property, the police set up surveillance and gathered intelligence for more than a week before moving in. On April 9th of 1989, the police arrested the head honcho, Elio Hernandez, and the nephew, Serafin, as well as several other men at the ranch, one of whom has the scar, but we never learn his name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sitting in jail, all the men were relaxed in a way that was incredibly disturbing to the police. They wouldn't talk, and they didn't seem at all concerned with any threats or talks from the authorities. So the police decided to interrogate the caretaker at the ranch. When they showed him a picture of Mark Kilroy, he said, "Yes, I saw him." And then he pointed towards a shack at the back of the property. In the shack was an iron cauldron, and inside the cauldron was a human skull, placed there by El Padrino, or the Godfather, leader of a drug-dealing cult that practiced human sacrifice. And before I tell you about El Padrino and his cult, I think this is a good time to take a break. So go grab a snack or go follow us on social media. We're on all the hits, YouTube, Insta, Facebook, or TikTok for however long that lasts. So come say hi, go see pictures of the cauldron and everyone involved in the case. And by the time you're done, the break will be over. And then everyone will come back. Welcome back. First, I'm going to tell you about the Godfather and the cult, and we'll come back to the shack and the cauldron soon.
Okay.
Adolfo Costanzo was born in Miami, Florida, to a Cuban immigrant who was only 15 years old when she gave birth. After her first husband died, his mother moved to Puerto Rico and remarried. Although she had her children baptized Roman Catholic, she brought Adolfo with her on trips to Haiti and introduced him to voodoo, believing that her son had psychic powers, which she encouraged. By the early 70s, his stepfather had died, and the family moved again, this time back to Miami. Adolfo's mother remarried for the third time to a man who was both a drug dealer and a practitioner of an occult religion known as Palo Mayombe. His new stepfather taught him the philosophy that non-believers should be sold drugs so that they could kill themselves while they got rich from their stupidity. I'm only quoting them.
All right.
I understand that substance abuse is a disorder. I'm just saying, they saw dealing drugs. It's almost like they didn't see it as something bad. Like if they were dealing drugs and you chose to buy them, that was on you.
Yeah, okay.
And that, if that makes sense. Like if they put them out on a table and no one bought them, then I guess they wouldn't make money. And if you bought them, then that's on you and they would get rich. It was up to the universe whether you would buy them.
Okay.
I don't believe that's okay. I'm just saying that's what they believe.
That's just what happened. Right.
That's how they saw it.
Yeah.
A quick explanation for our listeners, and also this is how I had to learn it. Palo Mayombe is an Afro-Cuban religion that began in the late 1800s, and it has an incredibly complex history and an even more complicated infrastructure. Without any official religious manuscripts and no central authority, practitioners have a lot of independence in how they choose to practice and even interpret the tenets of the religion. Palo Mayombe does believe in one creator, but for them, that God is uninterested in human affairs and will not answer prayers.
Okay.
Therefore, the practice centers around connections to the spirit world, in particular to our ancestors, the spirits that inhabit nature, and the dead. Practitioners keep a cauldron called a naganga, and it is what they consider their main source of power. And what they put into this cauldron gives them power for good or evil. They choose. The naganga can be filled with holy water, herbs, precious stones, or it can be filled with blood and bones.
Okay.
So even if you've come this far, things are going to get really ugly if you love animals. I know some people don't care if humans get hurt, and they get really upset if animals get hurt, and they will.
Okay.
So, I'm even throwing this in here. Adolfo Costanzo. He graduates high school in Miami. He does a quick stint modeling because apparently, and according to some, he's a good-looking guy. Then he moves to Mexico City to start his real business. It's not your typical entrepreneur. He sets up shop as a local sorcerer, offering spells for protection or good luck. And these spells are expensive since they
Wow.
required the customer to pay for animal sacrifices with goats, snakes, zebras, or even lion cubs.
Holy cow.
His clients included celebrities, members of drug cartels, and even corrupt politicians and high-ranking police.
Wow. Holy, that's
Yeah.
insane.
As his business grew, he gathered apprentices. What's going on?
Words.
Words. And he began to form a cult, which was his own combination of Santeria, Aztec warrior ritual, and Palo Mayombe. His cult was known as Narcosanticos, or the Narcosatanists, because it was a cult that dealt drugs, and while not worshiping Satan as you would think of it in Christianity, they were dealing in black magic. And Adolfo Costanzo was declared El Padrino, the Godfather. As his reputation grew and the cartels became more profitable, Costanzo demanded a full partnership with his biggest client at the time, which was the Calzadas family. The cartel family rejected his offer. And after that, 7 members of the Calzadas family disappeared.
Wow. That's sending a message.
Well, if that didn't send a message, when their bodies turned up later, that sent a message because they were
Yeah.
missing ears, fingers, and even their brains.
Wow. That had to be for like a spell or something for the
Yes.
cauldron.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's all going in his cauldron.
Mm-hmm.
Costanzo looked for a new partnership, this time with the cartel family of the Hernandez brothers. Through this meeting, he was introduced to the woman who would become his right hand, his high priestess, Sarah Aldrete, aka La Madrina, or the Godmother. Quick background on her. She is Cuban American, born in Matamoros, although she attended high school and college in Texas as a resident alien, and she studied to become a physical education teacher since she excelled at athletics. She towered over other women and even over most men. She was 6'1".
Wow. She was like a Amazon queen. I mean, I would love the title of High Priestess or Godmother. Like, I
Right?
think that's fantastic, but I can see where this is going and it has a negative connotation, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
I'm sure she was very intimidating.
Very. She was also, and I'm not going to shy away from it. When she was young and at her prime of her life, she was not only tall, she was very charismatic, and she was very beautiful. So it was very easy for her to bring in new, recruits into the cult.
Yeah.
Very easy to charm her way through things, and as the right hand leader, she was able to take over things whenever Adolfo was away.
She could have been like a supermodel, being 6'1" and
She could have.
a supermodel, the occult.
I mean, right? Tomato.
Right?
While she was attending Texas Southmost High School, she became acquainted with Serafin Hernandez Garcia, and she dated his uncle, Elio Hernandez,
Wow.
who is one of the brothers of the Hernandez cartel. While Adolfo was openly bisexual and had many lovers among his cult members. Both he and Sarah maintained that their partnership was not romantic. Maybe it was to keep business and pleasure separate, but they worked together as a dangerous team, and sex was not part of that particular equation. Everyone knew that La Madrina was in charge when Adolfo was away. She was his closest confidant. As for the new partnership, Adolfo quickly made himself integral to the Hernandez family. It was Adolfo who initiated Elio Hernandez as the head of the Hernandez drug cartel after the elder brother Saul was assassinated. Costanzo then further enmeshed himself into the organization by performing rituals that he promised would protect the Hernandez cartel from police and bullets. Adolfo made sure to place himself right in Elio's ear, convincing him that he was a special priest, and Elio Hernandez allowed Adolfo to brand him with special scars on his arm and chest. He was slowly becoming Costanzo's puppet. Adolfo moved the cult home base to the Rancho Santa Elena. So if you'll remember from the beginning, this is the ranch that is the prime owned Hernandez family base. So as the cult grew and the cartel became more powerful, Adolfo demanded greater sacrifice. It is important to point out that in the 1980s and 90s, the Gulf Cartel, of which the Hernandez family was a part of and is based in Matamoros, was worth $10 billion at that time. And no, I didn't do the math. Because I was like, that is so much freaking money.
So much.
So much money.
That's
insane.
Is
considered, it's insane. It is considered the greatest criminal dynasty on the U.S.-Mexican border, since they secured a relationship with the Colombian Cali cartel in the 80s.
Okay.
For perspective, by 1994, the Gulf Cartel was responsible for 1/3 of all the cocaine shipments entering the U.S.
Wow.
In the world.
I don't know why I've heard of like other cartels, but not the Gulf Cartel.
So if you've watched the Spanish Narcos on Netflix, like the subtitled one.
Oh, I don't think, no.
It'll come into play. And so that's there. So this, suffice to say, this is an investment that drug lords would do anything to protect.
All right.
Adolfo preached that the greater the sacrifice, the greater the power the organization would possess. So he demanded humans for sacrifice. In order to indoctrinate the members of the cult to the idea of human sacrifice, they were subjected to repeated viewings of the 1987 thriller film The Believers, which was about a New York City-based cult that practiced human sacrifice for money and influence. Never seen it, don't know anything about it. This is just what I know. The first victims were members of rival drug gangs or police who got in their way. They would be sexually assaulted, tortured, and then parts of them were used for concoctions in the Nganga, and the cult members would drink the brew.
I have a question, and this might be like way too morbid, but I
warned everybody. I warned everybody who right now is screaming. I warned you. I warned you.
So were there specific, so he had like different like I guess hexes or spells or things that he sold at one time, but then these different body parts that he was taking, like, I'm making this up, but did they need um eyes for so they could see danger, or hands so they could do something else? Like, was there specific things that they required for these spells?
Um,
They need brains to be really smart? I don't know.
no, I'm laughing because I laugh at morbid things, but
Yeah.
um, that's a great question. Probably.
Yeah.
However, what were those exact recipes? I don't know.
I don't
Uh,
either.
and because the practitioners were allowed to essentially form what they wanted independently in this,
Yeah.
I'm going to use religion very
Mhm.
loosely, in this occult practice. And I mean, in general, in occult practices, um, like even regular. I don't know if I should use a regular as a word. Witches,
Mainstream?
whether white or black, sure, um, can make up as they go their own spells, whether they work or don't work or what have you. It's all whatever you want it to be. So
Oh,
if he
okay.
stood in front of his cult and said, "I need eyes so that we can be invisible," or
Mhm.
"I need brains so that we can see the future," there's no one to contradict him. There's no
Yeah.
official Palomayombe like recipe book that someone's going to open and say, "Well, master, that's not what it says in the book."
Yeah.
He can make
Okay.
it up as he goes. However, you bring up a good point in that the more he makes it sound like it could make sense, the more that people will buy into it.
Yeah.
So I could buy into that. I mean, maybe. I
'Cause
I
it's
do think I
yeah.
do think probably, certain parts of the body had more value. It does seem like anything having to do with the head was most
Yeah.
valuable. Things below the torso seem to have been discarded pretty easily. They seem to not have cared much for like legs and arms.
Yeah. Only be like, 'cause I'm sure if people were being tortured, they'd be missing, like, fingers and toes and stuff. But I just am wondering, like, when these, like, family members washed up or people were discovered and they're like, "Oh, no, they were taken from the cult because they always take an ear," or something crazy. I don't know. I'm just
So I don't think they had a trademark where it was like, "Oh, they always take, the left eye," or something like that.
something.
But I do think that there was a general like when they would I hate to use this word. Okay, how should I put this? When they would sacrifice,
Mhm.
violate a body, dismember it, there were certain organs or pieces of a human that they wanted more than others. They wanted the
Yeah.
heart, they wanted the skull, they wanted the
Yeah.
brains. They felt these things were more valuable,
Yeah, okay.
maybe because they felt it had more life force, or because, like you said, some things seem like they lent themselves to the spell better than others.
I'm not gonna Google it.
Oh my God, not in my Google search history. You feel free, but not me.
Okay.
um, but I mean, they could sort of make it up as they went. No,
Yeah, I
nobody was
mean
gonna contradict him. But I mean, there was nothing I read that said they had like a signature thing.
okay, yeah. I was just curious, I don't know why. This is why we have a podcast, so
Yeah, yeah. Um,
but anyways.
so, um, but whatever they put in the pot, they were told that they had to drink it in order to gain its power.
Ugh.
Oh, I can't even. Um, yeah, the Narcosatanists believe that doing so would give them powers, whatever it was. It would make them invisible or bulletproof. And if you were a higher ranking cult members, you were allowed to take things like the vertebrae and keep those pieces to wear as a necklace.
All right.
Yeah. So it was in March of 1989 that Adolfo told his followers to bring him an Anglo male for sacrifice.
Okay.
He said this would bring them greater power than before. And that brings us back to the devastating discovery of Mark Kilroy, as well as the other victims of the Narcosatanists. The Mexican police refused to go any further in the investigation unless a spiritual healer known as a curandero would come and cleanse the area of evil. Afterwards, the police brought Elio, Serafin, and the other men back to the ranch, and at gunpoint, they were forced to excavate the ground behind the shed. After hours of digging, 15 mutilated bodies had been unearthed. All of them adult males who had been murdered in the past 9 months. One
That's
of those bodies, oh yeah, I mean, 15 in 9 months, you're going at a steady clip.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they had murdered a lot more people. These were only the ones they had murdered on the ranch during this time in the shed.
Well, and also for the spring break, you said like 60 people were missing. Not that they were taking all 60, but like just in this localized area. Then those numbers are huge.
Yeah. So one of the 15 bodies, unfortunately, belonged to Mark Kilroy, although no one was positive until the Brownsville police used dental records on the skull in the cauldron for identification.
Oh, Matt
The
Damon.
Oh, I know. The legs were missing from his torso, although Serafin explained to the police that they were only amputated after death to make burying the body easier. Which is why I said some body parts were not considered valuable at all. Several of the bodies had wires which ran through the spines and had ends of the wires sticking out of the dirt so that the vertebrae could be easily recovered at a later date, pulled up from the ground, so that they could use those pieces as necklaces, like I said, for those higher ranking cult members.
I think it's creepier when they find ways to, like, they've done it so many times that they've simplified or made the process like faster, better, stronger. I think that's almost worse. Like,
they've refined it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sick. So I know. According to Serafin Hernandez, he and the other members had mingled with the spring break students in Matamoros on the night of March 14th when they spotted Mark Kilroy and lured him close enough to a truck to kidnap him. He had been tortured for a full day before Costanzo finally killed him and used his body parts for his evil sacrifice. Adolfo Costanzo and his innermost circle were nowhere to be found at the ranch.
Of course.
They had fled to an apartment in Mexico City. And this little group included two of Adolfo's lovers, Álvaro de León and Martin Quintana, as well as Sarah La Madrina. No one had any idea they were hiding in this random apartment building until the police were called due to a disturbance in a completely unrelated unit. However, when the police arrived at the building, Costanzo panicked. He thought they were coming for him. So he opened fire on them from a balcony with a machine gun. So, of course,
Wow.
this triggered alarm bells. The police call for reinforcements. Everything just goes to shit. Costanzo barricades himself inside, and then he gives orders to his man, Alvaro de Leon. He tells him, "You're going to kill me and Martin." He says, "I'd rather die than be taken alive." When the authorities finally infiltrated the apartment, only Sarah Aldrete and Alvaro de Leon, who's also called El Dubi, were left alive.
Okay.
And they were promptly arrested. Even in a country constantly facing gang violence, uncovering the heinous and brutal acts of the Narcosatanists shocked everyone, and the story went international. 14 cult members were charged with crimes including drug running, obstruction of justice, and murder. This included all the big names we've discussed, like Sarah Aldrete, Elio Hernandez, Serafin Hernandez, El Dubi de Leon. Each was convicted of multiple murders and were ordered to serve lengthy prison sentences. In 1994, Sarah Aldrete, the godmother, was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Get this, she claims she's innocent, that she was manipulated by Costanzo through fear and charm, and denies personally participating in any murders or ritual sacrifices. She claims that the Mexican authorities are using her as a scapegoat, and she even wrote a book in prison about it.
I'm just fascinated at what her reasoning is, because everyone knew you were the woman in charge when he wasn't around, so you were calling shots. It's like those, I don't remember their names, but those girls who were arrested and they worked with Manson. They were all part of the Manson family. They're like, "Well, we didn't do it.
Yeah.
We just drove the van or whatever."
We're just doing what people told us to do. I'm going to call bullshit. I'm going to call bullshit on this one. No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had a happier ending, but this is just one of those times that a crazy story has no silver lining other than that a lot of the bad guys ended up dead or in jail. For all intents and purposes, the Narcosatanist cult disintegrated immediately after Costanzo died. But Mexico continues to suffer under the violence and control of cartels to this day. And I think we all know they will go to any lengths to keep themselves in business. So keep your group together, don't go where you shouldn't, and stay paranoid, because that's the millennial murder of the week.
That's fascinating. And so just by chance, I listened to a podcast of this guy who was going to Mexico, and when you get to Mexico, to Cancun or whatever airport you go into, they always walk you down the line of all of the people trying to sell you vacation packages or like just different services, scuba, snorkeling, all that stuff. And so the guy was like, "No, I don't need any of that. I'm literally here to go to my friend's house. I'm meeting other people, blah, blah, blah." And he spoke Spanish. And so he was just telling them, "No, thank you. No, thank you." And then they were like, "Okay, well, at least get our taxi cab." And he's like, "I'm not paying airport prices. Like, I speak the language. I'm going like 9 miles away." So he goes out and he's like trying to find his Uber, and he finds kind of like, there's the place where all the taxis are, and like 1 block further is where he gets his like non-airport price, because he was so adamant at not paying the extra fees, the airport fees and the hotel fees and things like that. So he finds his cab, gets in there, and the cab driver is like driving him all around. He's not listening to any of the directions. And then he finally stops at some like desolate, like little super, like a little Mercado or something, and locks him in the car, but leaves the driver door open. And he starts freaking out and he starts screaming. So the driver leaves and is going to speak to some other people. And he starts screaming, and someone just walking by is like, are you okay? Like, why are you screaming in the back of the car? And he tells him, I am trying to get to this address. He told me he was a taxi driver, blah, blah, blah. And the guy's like, you're not in a taxi cab. And so the guy was like, I can't get you out. And so he was like, can you get in the car and just drive away? So he's like, I'm not being a part of this. I just know,
Oh my God.
like, I just walked up on you. And so, long story short, the guy that was walking by gets him out of the car and is like, I know where you're going. It's not very far from here, but you were not in a taxi cab. Like, what do you want me to do with you? Like, I'm just a random person that saw an American screaming in a back of a car with the front door open.
Yep.
And so what he thinks was happening is he was stopped at like the halfway point and someone else was going to pick up the car and take him in the car to abduct him somewhere. And just by chance, a good Samaritan was walking by, but even the guy was like, I want no part of this. Like, I'm not going to steal a car for you. I'm not going to break you out. What if you're the dangerous one, you know?
Yeah,
And
you
I
just
was
don't know what
like,
you're getting involved in.
so all this to say, just get the airport taxi. Spend the $40.
Yeah, don't goof around. I can't. Was this by chance on a Jordan Harbinger story?
I don't know.
Because, okay, I love Jordan Harbinger. I've listened to so many of his podcasts. He's traveled in a lot of places, and I love Jordan, but sometimes he does things kind of like that where he like goes off the beaten path or
Yeah.
like trying to save money. And I get it. Like you're a white man, or I mean, I shouldn't say that. He might not be white, but he acts white. Sorry, Jordan, you do. So like sometimes he thinks he can just like go rogue and hop like in a taxi. And he talks about how he almost got kidnapped in Mexico, and a very similar story where he got into a cab.
It might have
He
been
thought it was
the
like a
same thing.
regular cab, and same thing where like all of a sudden the driver said, oh, I'm going to stop at a store, and he realizes he's locked in the car and somebody else had to help him or let him out or something very similar to that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It might have been the same thing.
Don't do
No.
that, guys. Get into registered cars, like real.
Please.
Get them at the airport from the people
Yes.
selling you the packages. I know it's gonna hurt your pocket, but like, whatever. Just do it. Get in the shuttle.
$27. Just pay the $20 or whatever it is.
Do
Get
it.
the shuttle.
Do it. I can't. Oh my God. Well, I have a quick palate cleanser if you want.
Okay,
Good news. So we don't end on a sour note. It's not in Mexico, but I saw that in the UK, Virgin Mobile just released, and they are like full off the ground test running, or full off the ground. I mean, running, but it looks like it's going well. They developed an AI. She's like a grandma voice. Her name is Daisy. And she is meant to field scam callers. So if a scammer calls, she is meant to keep them on the phone as long as possible. The idea being that if she's on the phone with them, they can't call you.
Mm-hmm.
And she's kept some of them on the phone for as long as 40 minutes.
Nice.
And if you heard her, she sounds like a real grandma.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so simple. I can't believe we haven't thought of this already, like an app or something.
Well, so hopefully they're going to make other voices, obviously, so people don't catch on. But hopefully we'll have like a whole cast, and then they'll bring it to the US.
That.
It's just like a little tiny glimmer.
That is a glimmer
in all of this. So there you go. Take that with you, and let's invent more of that.
Yeah, my glimmer is that I just haven't been to work in like a week.
I'm always up for staying home. It's cool.
I'm staying home. I'm enjoying. We've completed like maybe one home project, but we're at the point where we're I don't know if it's cabin fever or too much togetherness.
I mean, if no one's dead yet, we're okay.
Yeah, I haven't sacrificed him. There's no cauldron going.
There you
So
go.
it's still a win.
There you go. See?
That's
So
so
stay in, watch movies, and then prank your scam callers.
amazing. I love it. Great story. Thank you for not telling me before Mexico and waiting till after, because
You're
now I think
welcome.
about it all the time.
There you go. All right. Well, have a
All
great
right.
night, and I will see you next time.
All right. Have a good night.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.